Okay, the power of compounding interest. This is also very important. So it reads, using the links below, please explain what is meant by the power of compounding interest and how this concept can help you to increase your net worth over time. Okay, and I probably should write the definition of net worth again because sometimes you guys forget. Okay, so net worth, definition of net worth is your assets minus liabilities. Okay, that's the definition now. Okay, just in case you forget. Things that you can turn into cash or liquefy into cash minus things that you owe. Okay, and we have a couple of links here that are useful. On Monday, I tried the first link and it didn't work. But it's not that the link is down, is that the page was having some kind of problem. But I'm going to try today because the second link is pretty good, but it's not as good as the first one. But fortunately, I have two links so that on Monday, when the first link didn't work properly, I went to the second link and it was not as good, but good enough. Okay, so let's go to, let's see, maybe here. Let's go here. This might be good. I don't want to open another window if I don't need to. Okay, so we're going to Business Insider. Business Insider is a pretty good publication. But on Monday, they're having problems with their website, I think, or the web page. Okay, there it is. It's back. And the title of this article reads, these three charts show the amazing power of compounding interest. Okay, Benjamin Franklin said that compounding interest was one of the wonders of the world. One of the 7 wonders of the world, is what Benjamin Franklin said. That's kind of true. And of course, they have here a retired basketball legend, not basketball player, retired basketball legend, Michael Jordan, who's currently worth at about $1.6 billion. Yeah. He's a very smart businessman, as you probably know. Hats off to him. Yeah, well, but you have to bow down. If Michael Jordan walks into the room, you need to bow down, okay? Because it's not easy. It's not easy to go from 0 to $1.6 billion in a lifetime. Very hard. Okay, so this is the table I'm looking for. Here it is. Sometimes if you click on the table, it becomes larger, but I'm not sure if it's going to do it. The page might still be loading, actually. It takes a while for these things to load. Oh, it's loaded. Let me see. Let me try clicking on it, see if it gets bigger. Well, it didn't, so I have to make it bigger. Okay, let's make it a little bit bigger. Ooh, okay. That's pretty good size. This is a very interesting table. Okay, so let me see if I can go a little bit bigger, possibly. Not bigger. And that's about as big as I can go. I can't go any bigger, but it's pretty big. Okay, so this is a very telling graphic. Okay, and there's a caption that says, "Reading the fundamentals. Harnessing the power of compounding can greatly impact the amount of savings over the long term." And this is what you're looking for, right? You're looking for long-term growth. And in this graphic, we have 3 case studies. Now, I have to tell you that as a business instructor, I'm not particularly fond of case studies. I might be able to make it a little bigger. Maybe I can get rid of this insider thing. Oh no, it did something. I didn't want to do that. Oh, maybe it's going to go somewhere. Hopefully. Okay, let me go bigger. Oh, it did. Oh, no. Go back. Go back. That'll probably, when you click on it, I clicked on Insider, it took me to their Insider page, which that's not what I want. But I'm going back. I'm not a big fan of case studies. I know that the Harvard Business School is very famous for their case study method. In other words, they use case studies to teach business. But from my point of view, case studies are not useful because it's about somebody else in another place and time, and you're not there, and you're not in that company, and it's not that year, it's not the year that you're living, and it's kind of irrelevant from my point of view. But still, case studies can be useful in some situations. So for example, you want to ask people, successful people, how did they get to where they are, right? That's a case study, right? And people whose lives have turned into a kind of disaster. You don't want to ask them, how did you make a mess out of your life? But you want to ask them, what was their life like, to find out where they went wrong, so you don't do that. Okay, so case studies can be useful, but I think they have to be more personal. They cannot be like general case studies about a company in somewhere, sometime. I think that's not really useful. But you can look at friends or family members and see what they've done and what the results were, if they're positive, or see what they've done and what went wrong, so you can avoid doing that. Okay, so case studies can be useful. And here we have 3 case studies. One is Susan, one is Bill, one is Chris. And we're going to start with Susan. And to explain the graph, on the vertical axis, it goes from $0 to $1,200,000. Okay, now of course, to retire in California, if you don't have a pension and you don't have Social Security, you're going to need about $1 million, especially if you're female. If you're male, you can probably get by and have a pretty good life with less than $1 million. But if you're a woman, you probably need about $1 million to retire in California comfortably for 20 years, if you don't have a pension and you don't have Social Security. Okay, so that's a good number. 1,200,000 is a good number. Okay, and on the horizontal axis, we have from age 25 to 65. Now, they probably started with 25 because most people, not most people, but yeah, a lot of people start college at age 18. And of those people who finish college, which is about 30% of Americans who finish some college level, okay, the people who finish a 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree, it usually takes them 5 years to finish. That means that on average, bachelor's graduate might be 23 years old, and then they need a couple of time, maybe a couple of years to be able to start investing, okay? Because they got to pay off some loans and buy maybe a new car and this and that, okay? So anyway, so it starts at 25, and your typical work life is 40 years. So it goes from 25 to 45 to 65, which is your standard or typical work life. And then people retire. Although most Americans retire at 62, because that's when they can start taking out their Social Security payments at 80%, and they need the money, so they jump on it as soon as they can. Okay, so let's start with Susan, okay? And it reads, Susan invests $5,000 annually between the ages of 25 and 35, so for 10 years, okay? So this is Susan here, from here to here. In total, she invests $50,000, $5,000 a year between age 25 and 35 for 10 years, and then she stops. At age 35, she stops investing, maybe because she started a family. Right now, she has children, and she can't invest anymore because she needs money for the children's housing, for their food, their clothing, their schooling, like that. So she stops at 35. Maybe she had a child or 2 children or something like this. Okay, so she invests $5,000 a year for 10 years, from age 25 to 35, and then she stops. Okay, and then, but the money, she's invested $50,000 in the early part of her life. So when she retires at 65, when Susan retires at 65, she retires with about $600,000, okay, which is pretty good. Let's do the math. Okay, So let's say she has $600,000 in retirement, which is pretty outstanding, I would say. Most Americans have a net worth of about $100,000. So $600,000 is quite outstanding. That's an excellent job. She did a great job, fantastic job, compared to most Americans. Okay. So Susan is a killer. She's very good. Okay, but she only did it for 10 years. She stopped at 35. Still, she's a killer compared to most Americans. Okay, she has $600,000, and the recommended expenditure rate after retirement, meaning from 65 till the end of her life, is for a woman is 3%. Okay, so take $60,000 multiply by 0.03. Oops, not like that. Multiplied by 0.03. That means she can spend $18,000 every year for the rest of her life, and she should not run out of money starting at age 65. Okay, because she's probably going to be in retirement 20 or 25 years. She'll probably live to age 80, 85, maybe 90. Okay. $18,000 a year, and we divide by 12 months. That would give her $1,500 a month to spend every month for the rest of her life. Now, that's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money in California. In California, that would probably give you like the life of a student. You know, she might have to rent a room in a house, or she might have to share an apartment with other people, or something like that. It's not. That's not a particular. That's not a good life. Okay, not that student life is not a good life when you're young, but if you're in your golden years and you're living like a student, that's not the goal. Okay, that's not the vision. Okay, when you're young and you're living like a student, that's okay, that's normal. But if you're in your golden years and you're living like a student, then something went amiss. Okay, so but that would give you give Susan $1,500 a month to spend every month for the rest of her life, and she should not run out of money. But let's assume that she has the average Social Security payment in California, which is $1,745 a month. Okay, so then to that we add $1,745 a month, and then now she would have $3,245 a month spent every month for the rest of her life. Keep in mind that Social Security is a monthly payment for the rest of your life. Okay. So at that point, she would have a little over $3,000 to spend every month for the rest of her life. That will give you a good quality of life in California. Quite good, quite good. I would say excellent. Not fantastic, okay, but excellent. If you have $3,000 a month to spend every month in California per person, that's a very good life. Okay, so that's good. Now, if she had a pension to go with that, then it would be more. But we won't do that because we don't know if she has a pension. There's a good chance you'll have a Social Security check, but chances are most Americans no longer have pensions, unfortunately. So I think since we're in this class, we're talking about averages, right? Averages, medians. There's no point in talking about outliers, right? The 15% or so of Americans who have pensions. There's no point talking about them because that's probably around 50% of the adult population. So 85% of working Americans probably will not have access to a pension. So there's no really, well, unless I was working with, you know, the uppity group, right? Then we can talk about that. The 50% that are at the top who are getting pensions, then we could talk about it. But we're mostly talking about averages here, averages and medians. Okay, so that's Susan's case, okay? So she did a good job. She did a great job, especially if she has Social Security, average Social Security check, plus a net worth of $600,000. She did a great job, fantastic job. My hat's off to her, okay? Very good, okay? Let's go to the next case, which is Bill. Bill is this kind of green. Now, they should use like red, you know, because they have like, this looks like blue and green. They should use red. They use like gray and green, kind of, yeah, green and then like a light blue. Okay, so let's go to Bill's case. This is another case study. Bill invests $5,000 annually, between the ages of 35 and 65. So he starts later than Susan. Susan started at 25. Okay, and in total, so he invests for 30 years. So in total, he invests $150,000. So a lot more than Susan. Okay, so Bill starts 10 years later than Susan, but he doesn't stop. She stops at 35. He keeps going for 30 years investing. She invests $50,000. He invests a total of $150,000. And at age 65, Bill retires with $540,000, less than Susan. Okay, so he invested a lot more money than she did because he invested 150. She only invested 50, but he started 10 years after her. She started 10 years before him, right? So the lesson here is you want to start as soon as possible. The longer you wait, the more money you'll have to invest to retire wealthy, right? The longer you wait, the more difficult this will be. The earlier you start, the easier it'll be. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy to start early, okay? Because when you're a young person, you have a lot of needs. You need clothing, you need a better car, you need some furniture, maybe you need to buy a refrigerator, maybe you need to buy a washer, maybe a dryer, you have a lot of needs, right? But the sooner you start, the better, okay? Because here, Susan only invested $50,000, but because she started 10 years before Bill, she outperformed Bill, okay? And she retires with $600,000, Bill retires with $540,000, okay? So she outperformed, okay? So let's go back to our calculator and find out how Bill did, okay? So Bill retires with a net worth of $540,000 and 741. Okay, so this is after 65 years of life. He's got $500,000 in his account. This is very good. Okay, this is very good. Again, most Americans have a net worth of about 100,000. So he did very well. He did very well. But of course, most Americans are in the 30s, so they have time to build, to grow, to try to be like Susan or Bill. Okay, people do have time. If you're in your 30s and you have a net worth of about $100,000, you still have maybe 30 years to grow. Okay, so he did a good job. Okay, but now the expenditure rate for males is a little bit higher than for women because women are outliving men by about 5 years on average. Okay, or meaning the other way to say that, which is not so pleasant, is men are living 5 years less than women. Okay, so because if you're male, you're probably gonna live 5 years less than your cohorts, meaning people who were born the same year as you were. So you can spend your money a little bit faster because it doesn't have to last as long because you're not gonna last as long. Okay, as the women who were born in the year that you were born. Okay, so expenditure rate for men recommended is 4%. Okay, so Bill can spend about $21,000 every year for the rest of his life, and she should not run out of money. Of course, this assumes that you're not going to have some unforeseen expense, okay, like assisted living, long-term care, that you're going to be in good health to the end of your life, which is a big assumption, but it is true in some cases. My mother is 88, and she's independent. She lives by herself in a senior home, and she doesn't drive anymore, but she goes to the market, she goes to church, she's an independent person, and she's 88. Okay, so that it can happen, but that's a big if, in my view. Okay. So anyway, but Bill has $21,000 to spend every year for the rest of the life of his net worth. Okay, based on his net worth, and we divide it by 12 months. That gives him $1,800 a month to spend. Now, $1,800 a month to spend in California is not that good either. It's not that good. It's a little bit better than a student, but not a lot better. Not a lot better, just somewhat better. Again, with $1,800 a month, you might have to rent a room or share an apartment. And some people don't like to share apartments because people get into tissies with each other. They get into little conflicts about you didn't wash the dishes, it's your turn to clean the toilet or whatever. It's your turn to vacuum, whatever. And so people usually don't. It's hard living with people, as you probably know. Okay, so this is not so good. It's a little better than a student, but not that great. Okay, but let's assume that Bill has your average California Social Security check, okay? Because the average in the country is 1554, which is less than California. California, it's 1745, okay? So let's say he has your average California Social Security check. So we can add 1745. So now he's at 3,500 a month. That's very good. Very good. Okay. In that case, he can live pretty well, right? If per person, right? If you can spend $3,500 every month for the rest of your life, and you don't have any major expenses, unforeseen major expenses in the future, you're going to live a very good life. And then people would say, well, what about inflation? Well, you know, every year they increase your Social Security check a little bit. And if he is a good investor, he can get a good return on his $500,000 investment to offset inflation. So he can deal with inflation by being a good investor, number one, and he can address inflation through the increments that are given in Social Security every year. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big. Okay, so that's pretty good. You did a good job, quite a good job. Okay, I'm not sure who did better actually. I think, let me see, let's compare Susan. If I can find Susan. Let's see, where's Susan? Susan had she had 18, she had 1,500 a month. 1,500 a month, he had 1,800 a month. Yeah, he did a little better than Susan. But the reason he did better than Susan is because he's male, I think. Or about the same. They did about the same, I think. They each had $1,500 a month to spend. So, okay, but she only invested for 10 years, and then she stopped because she started early. Okay, so starting early is very important for you young people out there. Okay, starting early is very, very important, as is the rate of return. Okay, let's go to our third case study here, and this is Chris. And Chris, we don't know if it could be male, could be female. Okay, could be Christopher, could be Christine. It's the shortened version of Christopher or the shortened version of Christine. We don't know. So it could be male or female. We don't know. Okay, but it reads, Chris invests $5,000 annually between the ages of 25 and 65. So Chris started early. This is very important. Okay, and in total he invests. So he invested during 40 years. 40 years. Okay. So in total he invests $200,000. Okay, totally. Started at 25, 40 years of investing consistently, $5,000 every year. In total, he or she invested $200,000. And when Chris retires, after 40 years of investing, he or she retires with over $1 million. Okay. So clearly, Chris outperformed both Susan and Bill by a long shot, basically double, right? The returns that Chris obtained were essentially double what Susan and Bill were able to produce. So the question is why? Why? How come if Bill retired with $500,000 and Susan retired with $600,000, how come Chris retired with $1 million, almost double or almost double? Well, the reason is clear, right? First of all, Chris started early, same as Susan, started at age 25, right? And while Susan quit at age 35, maybe because she had a child or two, right? Chris kept going, like, you know, like with hitting a nail with a hammer, right? Like every year. Well, it's more than every year. It's like every day, every week, every month, every year, decade after decade for 4 decades, until he drove the nail through. Right? I told one of my students, they asked me, how'd you? I live in a nice house in a nice street, in a nice area, and one of my friends, but he's kind of my student because I train him, asked me, how'd you do this? And I told him, well, we just kept hitting the nail with a hammer. And then he was very disappointed. It was like, he's a young guy. He's like, oh no, well, you know, That's what it takes, right? At every level of performance. I mean, there are people, like Donald Trump and many others who have performed fabulously, right? But they do it the same way. It's just that their investment is larger. Maybe the rate of return is better, right? But it's the same process, right? It's the same process. Investment times rate of return, and you have to hit it, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year for decades to get results. Okay, so let's look at the example of Chris. Okay. So Chris retires with $1 million, a little over $1 million. My dentist has a $2 million fund. She works very hard. She's in people's mouths all day, every day, including Sundays. Okay, so there's 1,142,000 and change. Okay, so let's we can do the male case first or the female case first. Let's do the female case first because that's not as attractive. Okay, let's assume Chris is a woman. And so we multiply it by the recommended expenditure rate of 0.03% for a woman. That means Chris would have $34,000 a year spent every year for the rest of her life, and she should not run out of money, barring any unforeseen future expenses that were unexpected. Divided by 12, that would give her $28.57 a month to spend every month for the rest of her life. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Not great, but quite good. Pretty good. Okay. And then let's say that Chris also had the average Social Security check, just to make it more interesting. Okay. So we add in California, it's $1,745 on average. So now Chris would have $4,600 a month to spend every month for the rest of her life. That's very good. $4,600 a month to just spend every month. Bam, 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 bam. For the rest of your life is quite good. Okay. And then again, the issue comes, well, what about inflation? Maybe inflation is going to erode her purchasing power. But again, if Chris is a good investor and is able to invest the $1 million wisely, that will offset inflation. And Social Security does give you a cost of living increase every year, sometimes less, sometimes more. Okay, so between savvy investing and the Social Security cost of living increases, that should offset inflation. And still, so she will be spending $4,600 every month for the rest of her life. That's very good. This money will probably go to her grandchildren. She'll be buying her grandchildren all kinds of stuff, probably. Okay, but let's assume that Chris is male, and he retires with 1,142,000 and change. Okay, and again, the expenditure rate for men is a little bit, the recommended expenditure rate for men is a little bit higher than for women because on the positive side, women are living 5 years longer than men almost. And on the not so positive side, men are living 5 years less than women on average, okay? So men can spend down their money, their net worth, a little more quickly than women because their time horizon is not as long, unfortunately, or fortunately. Okay, so let's take the 1 million something and multiply it by 0.04, which is the expenditure rate recommended for men. And then Christopher would have about $45,000 to spend every year for the rest of life, and he should not have run out of money. Okay, and let's divide that by 12 months. That would give him about $3,800 a month to spend every month. So that's a very good life. That's a very good life. Okay, so in California, but let's say he also had the year average Social Security check for California, which is $1,745. So we'd have about $5,500 to spend every month for the rest of his life. He'd probably be driving a luxury car. Okay, these are the guys that you see on the street. I see on my street. Okay, older guys driving Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Rolls Royce, Maserati, you know, Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, whatever. Okay? That's where that money's come from. If you're wondering how come you're on the street, you see these old guys driving these very expensive cars, well, there's your answer. There's your answer. If you had $5,500 a month to spend every month for the rest of your life, could you afford to drive a luxury car? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. Right? But you need to get to that point, right? If you start doing this when you're young, you will not get to this point, probably. More than likely, you might, but probably not. Okay, so what we learned from the Chris's example is that if you want to retire wealthy, you want to start as early as possible, and you want to be consistent for the next 40 years or so to maximize your net worth, right? Start early, invest consistently for the next 40 years, and you should retire very comfortably with a good deal of comfort. Okay. The other side of the coin is that if you don't start early, okay, and you don't invest consistently, you're not going to get these numbers. You'll get something, but it might be a pittance. You know, it might be $100,000 or less. Okay, if you don't start early and you're not consistent in your investing. Okay, and by the way, since we're talking about investing, I know many people are very leery to invest in the stock market. I know I am. I'm one of them. Okay, but it works. It has worked. I mean, it's worked for the last 100 years, so it should work in the future. Although, as people say, past performance is not necessarily an indicator of future performance. That is true. Okay, but it should work. It should work. It depends. If you believe in the American economy, and if you believe in American companies, if you believe in American enterprise, American industries, American companies, the American people, the American economic system, then it should work. Okay. Warren Buffett is a big believer in the American system, the American economy, the American industries, American companies, the American people, etc. And it's worked. It's worked very well for him, fabulously well for him. He's at what, $64 billion or something. So he's, you know, $64 billion. What are you gonna do with that? You can't eat $64 billion worth of hamburgers. Okay. So it's worked very well for him and other people too. It's worked well for us. It worked well for us. It's been up and down. You know, we had ups and downs, as you know, because that's the business cycle. The business that's more than the business cycle. It's the principle of yin and yang. There seems to be this principle of yin and yang that operates in the world, and it seems to be inescapable. Inescapable. As hard as the government will try to avoid the yang will come, no matter what. Okay, our yang right now is called COVID-19. Okay, so we were doing great 2 years ago. We were doing fabulous. The economy was doing fabulously well in the United States 2 years ago, which is the yin. And then we got hit by COVID-19. That's the yang. Okay, and so that seems to be inescapable. And we know that markets go up and down, up and down, up and down. But the overall trend in the United States and in California is up. As I mentioned earlier, the average home price in California in the 1960s, which would be about 50 years ago, was in the 20,000 something, 20 to $29,000 was the average home price in California 50 years ago. Today, the median home price in Los Angeles and Orange County is about $1 million. Right? So that's a lot of appreciation. Okay. Okay. Okie dokie. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, next slide. Oh boy, I'm running way over. Okay. So you can do this, folks. Okay. Unfortunately, I never had this kind of training in my business program. No. I had some training from my parents, but my parents' family, both on my father's side and my mother's side, are real estate families. So what I learned from my parents with regard to investing, I had to do mostly with real estate, how to make money in real estate.